One who would know the way must first observe the subtlety of water. Thus begins Taoist wisdom. Taoism is an ancient and living religious philosophy from China. It started out in China and spread to other parts of Asia and of course is found all over the world. It is a tradition that is both mystical, practical, truthful, and obscure. Today I would like to share some of the wisdom of this religious philosophy and acknowledge that I do not know very much about it, which is strange because I've been studying Taoism for the past 30 years. In truth, being ignorant about Taoism is not a fatal flaw. The first words in the Tao Te Ching, the classic text on Taoism, state, "The way that can be spoken is not the true way." By this is meant that the Tao, the way of Taoism, is not something that can be completely defined. It can only be understood internally, but we may not be able to find the words to speak of what it actually is. Much like God, I suppose. This is only the beginning of Taoist thinking. Taoism arose in China about 2,500 years ago. It really became established in the writings of a person named Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu, nowadays it's currently imagined that Lao Tzu was actually more than one philosopher. It was a school of philosophers who just went by one name. And there's also the belief that Lao Tzu was a philosopher, state archivist, and contemporary of another Chinese philosopher, Confucius. Legend tells that Lao Tzu was a follower of Confucius who became disillusioned with Confucian wisdom and sought to form a religion more in tune with the natural world rather than the human world. Lao Tzu wrote down the religious ideas he received from observing nature in his book, the Tao Te Ching, loosely translated as the way and virtue. Lao Tzu's beliefs spread throughout China at almost the same pace as Confucian wisdom, and soon they competed in the forum of ideas. In China, 4 major religions coexist with each other, intermingling and sharing, and in some cases competing for the minds of the people. Most people in Asian cultures, unlike Western cultures where somebody would say, "I'm a Unitarian Universalist," somebody would say, "Well, you know, I am a Shinto." If you're Japanese, you might say, "I'm a Shinto, but I also go to the Buddhist temple, and there's another shrine that's maybe a local shrine that I go to as well." So the people in different Asian cultures often find that they are going from one religious group to another without seeing any contradiction of them. Only in places in the West, for example, is Buddhism considered exclusive to the people. Someone you would say somebody's a Buddhist. Whereas in Asia, someone would say, "You know, I go to the Buddhist shrine and I'm trying to learn this." And they may actually be lighting candles to a deities as well. In China, the 4 major religions coexist with each other. Those 4 native religions are Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and animism. Animism is a belief in spirits, ancestor worship, a multitude of deities. If one had to label the most commonly found religion in China, of those who do actually practice religion, that religion would not be the other 3 that the Westerners hear the most about. The most common religion in China is probably animism, with an overlay of the other religious philosophies. Very different from our religious environment. In a sense, the 3 dominant religious philosophies of China answer different issues. Buddhism seeks to transcend the world. Confucianism seeks to succeed in the world. Taoism seeks to accept the world and to survive in it. Because these views are not necessarily contradictory, individuals tend to turn from one religious view to another, all the while lighting candles or burning incense to the goddess of luck, or giving a gift to appease the spirit of a local river or mountain. So what is it that Taoists believe? Taoists believe that the natural world is the ultimate revelation of reality. Taoists believe that the natural world reveals polarities of existence, and that wisdom requires acceptance of these polarities of existence. The polarities of existence are most familiarly, I'll get it out. You know what I mean. Represented in the most common Taoist symbol, the yin and the yang, that divided circle of which there's a white part and a black part, with a spot of white in the black part, and a spot of black in the white part. For the Taoists, the yin and yang represent negative and positive energy, the masculine and the feminine, the firm and the yielding, the strong and the weak, the light and the dark, the good and the evil, the rising and the falling, heaven and earth. They are even represented in such everyday matters as cooking, as the spicy and the sweet. But to the Taoists, this yin and yang, positive and negative energy, represent natural forces of the universe, found in all things and all places. Taoism is a religious philosophy of coping with the balance of events in life. There's a commonly told story about a Taoist farmer which illustrates the yin and yang and how the Taoists feel about our existence. One day the farmer's horse ran away. That evening the farmer's neighbors gathered to commiserate with him since this was such bad luck. The farmer said, "Maybe." The next day the horse returned, but brought with it 6 wild horses, and the neighbors came exclaiming at his good fortune. He replied, "Maybe." And then the following day, his son tried to saddle and ride one of the wild horses, was thrown and broke his leg. Again, the neighbors came to offer their sympathy for his misfortune. He said, "Maybe." The day after that, the army came to the village and conscripted and pressed all the young men of the village into the imperial army. But because of his broken leg, the farmer's son was rejected for impressment. When the farmer's neighbors came out to say how fortunate everything had turned out, the farmer replied, "Maybe." This illustrates the great virtue of Taoism, flexibility. Taoists believe that water reveals the way that life should be lived and accepted. Water is a substance which retains its essential integrity, yet changes form often. Taoists point out that water is found in the form of liquid, solid, and steam or humidity. Now I know that some of the chemists will wish to argue this point or that, but the reality is that water permeates the surface of this planet. It conforms to the container it is placed in when it is not frozen. If adequate in measure, it is present and necessary for all life forms here. Water is a substance which by itself is weak, yet all the great mountains will eventually be eroded away by little drops of rain. The highest mountains that have ever existed on earth were the Appalachians. They're nowhere near the way they once were because they are one of the oldest mountain chains on earth, and billions of years of little droplets of water wore them away. Lao Tzu writes, "The highest good is like water. For the good of water is that it nourishes everything without striving. It occupies the lowest places. It is thus that the way in the world is like a river going down the valley to the ocean. The most gentle thing in the world overrides the most hard. How do coves and oceans become kings of 100 rivers? Because they are good at keeping low. That is how they are kings of 100 rivers. Nothing in the world is weaker than water, but has no better than overcoming the hard. This is the revelation of what the Taoists call Li, organic order. It is the way that the universe runs according to the Taoists. It is like chaos theory, and that the universe does possess randomness. Darwinian evolution, the belief that all life is derived from pre-existing forms through mutation and natural selection, is a revelation of Li. For different species to be created depends on both upon external factors and random mutation. Random mutation means that something goes wrong or right in the reproductive process, and that the result is either a beneficial change for a species or a detrimental one for the individual. Only time will tell. Taoism assumes that yin and yang, the positive and negative in the universe, are only part of a dance. They also assume that despite our attempts to understand everything, chaos will always be a factor in existence. Taoism, accordingly, does not believe that the universe has a great purpose. One of the elements of such a philosophy, I imagine, is that one can accept that in life there is triumph and tragedy, good and bad. For the Taoists, this means that the yin and yang force are in all things. Like the farmer whose neighbors exalted and then mourned at his luck, there exists in every situation the possibility that good will come or that bad will also be present. This happens in very real ways in individual human lives. A woman makes a lot of money, but the wealth isolates her from her old friends. A corporate executive loses his position and has to take a lesser paying job. Because he works fewer hours, though, and has fewer responsibilities, he has the opportunity to spend more time with his family. The successful entertainer wins Grammy Awards, but that success leads her into isolation and chemical dependency. In other words, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Therefore, Taoism suggests that the path of least resistance and attachment to outcomes is the only one which offers balance. This means that in all things is the presence of its opposite. And that is true for each one of us, I suppose. I have read years ago an article about lottery winners. It might be imagined that with so much money that they would be happy. Just the opposite is true. Most lottery winners do not know what to do with their newfound riches, and 80% of them have to declare bankruptcy within 10 years of winning. Almost all of the lottery winners in the article said that they wished they had never won and they could have their old lives back again. Taoists would say this situation represented lives out of balance. Taoism holds that such balance is as part of the universe as randomness and chaos. This is just the form that all things conform to. In a passage in the Tao Te Ching that sounds like something out of Star Wars, Lao Tzu writes, "The great way flows everywhere, to the left and to the right. All things depend upon it to exist, and it does not abandon them. To its accomplishment, it lays no claim. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them." Does not lord it over them. This represents the other side of Taoism. Taoists believe in Wu Wei, or inaction. Wu Wei is the ethical aspect of following Taoism. Wu Wei does not mean that someone does not work for a living or that one does not make decisions. Wu Wei is the belief that humans do not control reality. This means that Taoists surrender their egocentric notions that they are really in control of their destinies, that they can meld the universe to fit their needs without becoming out of balance. In Taoism, the ultimate delusion is that the individual believes that he or she is master. Taoists believe that weakness, with an awareness of humbleness, is actually strength. They believe that flexibility is more to be valued than hardness or steadfastness. This principle is often illustrated by the parable of the pine and the willow trees in heavy snow. The pine branch, being rigid, cracks under the weight of the snow, but the willow branch, being flexible, yields to the weight, and the snow drops off. Note that the willow branch is not limp, but springy. Wu Wei is thus using intelligence and wisdom to use the appropriate means to respond to existence. Taoists believe that rules and regulations and great ideals are not the signs of progress as much as they are signs of decay and degeneration. Lao Tzu writes, when the way was lost, there came ideas of humanity and justice. When knowledge and cleverness arrived, there came great deceptions. When familial relations went out of harmony, there came ideas of good parents and loyal children. When the nations fell into disorder and misrule, there came ideals of loyal bureaucrats. In other words, our ideals often derive from their absence. There is some truth to this. The ancient Roman philosophy of Stoicism, which emphasized personal sacrifice for the common good, arose at a time when ancient Romans were becoming more and more selfish and unwilling to sacrifice personally for the empire. In other words, it's an ideal that came forth out of its absence. Taoism is a religious philosophy that is based upon observation of nature. It is perhaps the only ancient religious philosophy or belief that can be proven to have some basis in science. There's even a book entitled The Tao of Physics, which Heisenberg and Niels Bohr read and found inspiration from. In this way, Taoism might speak to those who are interested in the integration of religion and science. Taoism is also often perceived as a religious philosophy of the peasants. The way that Taoism is practiced does not lend itself to power, but survival. And that is something that is unusual in a religious belief. Indeed, there's a branch of Taoism that is dedicated to practices that further health and longevity. Unlike most ancient religions, Taoism is not about the future existence of the soul after death, but focuses on the here and now, survival, health, making it through this. The religious philosophy was developed at a time when most people in Asia had very little power. The prime virtue of Taoism is balance, and living in balance is rarely a goal in the work of social justice. Therein is a challenge that some Unitarian Universalists might find in Taoism. For years, I thought of myself as a Taoist, but I found some internal contradictions. One, possibly social justice is the strongest thing. The first thing that I read that this Taoist philosopher said was, accept things as they are. Unitarian Universalists don't do that very easily. That's not our way, or at least for most of us. We believe in change. We believe in many different points of view, but we also believe that we are agents of change and possibility. Maybe that's our delusion. I don't know. Today I would like to leave you with these words of wisdom from the great Taoist philosopher, Chuang-Tzu, or Chuang-Tzu. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. He writes, "You are trying to pull yourself together. So don't listen with your ears, but with your heart. You don't listen with your mind, but with your spirit. Let hearing stop with the ears, and the mind stop at thinking. Then the spirit is a void, embracing everything, and the only way includes the void. This void is the fasting of the heart." This is probably a very truthful thing that I have experienced in my life. Sometimes, maybe you've experienced this too. When I've been unable to understand something or I'm faced with a dilemma, I have found that if I stop thinking, the answer will come to me. And I think that's what Chuang-Tzu is trying to say. We are connected. That's one of the beautiful things about Taoism. May our connections enable us to listen to the balance within ourselves, with each other, with our planet, and with the universe. May we find the way of harmony and listen with our spirits to what the universe tells us. May we learn to apply that wisdom and live lives of true sacredness and extraordinary awakeness. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.